Story 1. The events took place 2 years ago. Backstory: I used to go to this really cheap school. Their budget was so low that they couldn't afford substitute teachers, although sometimes they had money for events and/or trips. Before I start the story, I have to tell you about the quality of the teachers. It was held kind of low, but it had some high highs and some very low lows. Some of my teachers began giving preferential treatment to the girls, as in, the girls would be treated as if they could do nothing wrong, and the boys would be treated as potential criminals. This led to some of the girls in my class antagonizing the boys and stealing their work. The story: this all took place at an event called Lego League. The aim of the event is to find a problem and theorize and market a product that can solve it, and then build a robot. This time it was themed after space. During this, you are put into groups of 12, and then the groups are sectioned into 3 parts. The 3 parts are 3 people in the marketing section. They market the product and create a marketing strategy. 4 people in the project section, they show off the product. And 5 people are sent to the robotics section. They build a powerful robot. I landed in the marketing section with one of the worst of the previously mentioned girls, henceforth Jess, and one dude who slacked off and did not contribute anything. But he didn't get in the way. I was appointed as the boss of the marketing branch, and Jess didn't take nicely to that, got mad and told the teacher. She was then appointed as the boss. It didn't take long for me to realize that I would have all the work dumped onto me, and the project was going to be a train wreck. And after a week, I was right. I had to find the combined cost of the project in real life. This was hard as I had to find the right fuel, the right engines, the cost of workers, the layout of the insides, the combined weight of the structure, the places we get our materials from, and who our demographic is. Jess also decided to dump the 5-page essay onto me, which we were supposed to do together. After long and painful weeks of doing all of the above and more, she told the teacher that she was doing it all and would appreciate it if I would pitch in a little. I was shocked when I heard it. I tried proving my case, but my teacher wasn't having it and sent me to detention. The revenge: I had had enough and was burnt out after all the work I had to do. So I ended up getting really sick and was out of school for 3 weeks. But I did also do another vital part of the project, which included a 2-page part on a report of the entire project, and I knew that I still had a chance to screw everything up for her, because I knew that she would pass that off as hers and that she was too lazy to check it. So I rewrote the 5-essay page all of the above to make it seem too ambitious, and made it sound unreasonable. I also started crediting everything I wrote to her so she would end up in trouble as the sole reason the project failed. I wrote a small script that we were supposed to present to the event judges, but I made what they were supposed to say heavily dependent on the essay. The day comes and I hand my group mates the script, but during the day all computers and personal electronics are banned unless it's an emergency. I started off by saying what I was supposed to, and then it came to the slacker. He mumbled something I couldn't hear, and I had to step in to save his performance. Now it's Jess' turn, and she utters this marvelous sentence: "The thing works by extending another thing and grabbing trash." Loud sigh of anger. "Don't ask me, he wrote it." She points at me. "Huh? That's weird. I thought you wrote the essay." I said it in a confused tone, like I didn't plan it for weeks. But. She sputtered like a broken record. I still finished the presentation, and Jess left the building in tears. The aftermath: I was questioned by the teacher who organized the event and told him about what happened. Needless to say, I got a written apology by the teacher and by Jess. But for Jess, her integrity ruined. Her grade down. Her friends gone. I switched schools a year later. Story 2. It's a pretty long story, so prepare popcorn. Also sorry for bad English, it's not my native language. The story started about 2 years ago. I was finishing my 2nd year of automation engineering. Also, I worked in the industry before and had graduated from technical high school, higher secondary. So I knew a bunch of useful stuff. The company that hired me as a part-timer, 16H a week, was making a bunch of mechanical devices. It's pretty specialized stuff, one of 3 manufacturers of that stuff in my country, so I can't say what exactly. My job after a month of learning how stuff work was to help in fixing broken down automated equipment, for example. When replacing proximity sensors with what was at hand, teaching 40-ish or 50-ish years old mechanics and electricians from fixing department about how modern stuff worked and how to fix it, making makeshift fixes for machines that had to work, but we had no spare parts at hand delivery would take too long, makeshift solutions, reprogramming PLCs after changing it to new models, etc. B. Finding places where efficiency could be improved by ergonomics or by automating certain processes and designing it. It all comes to the B point of my duties. My office desk came with a computer that barely could run SolidWorks, which was my main workhorse. Almost 75% of my time behind the desk was using SolidWorks. Something that would take a few seconds on my middle-grade gaming laptop was taking literally minutes. Also, it used to crash when I tried to manipulate design with more than 10-15 parts. I asked my boss if I could get something better. He said that maybe after my 3 months trial period. I asked if I could use my private laptop. He agreed. It'll be important later. And they called it guys to give me a SolidWorks license and cybersecurity briefing. Fast forward, I'm already hired for almost 3 months. I made a pretty good design of automated workstation. About $250,000 in cost of implementation, $140,000 of saving yearly after implementation period, with worst case scenario, WCS, of return of investment in 22 months. My boss gave it a green light, but after presenting it to his boss rejected it for the little impact. 2 weeks later, I got my new contract for 12 months, better pay, few benefits, but no new PC because I could work on my own. I just asked the guys directly if they could give me another, bigger display, and got one which they had as spares. After another 5 months, I presented another design of process automation. This time I've gone bigger, $800K cost of implementation, $425K of yearly savings, and 27 months of WCS return. This time it was all accepted. Work should be finished on December of 2018, but due to delays of our contractors, we finished it at the end of January 2019. The main problem starts there. My contract guaranteed me 1% of costs of implemented designs as a bonus. I should get it with my January payout, but in my bank account I found only normal pay, around $900. Remember, I'm a part-timer. I asked my boss about it and heard that bonuses are paid once a year in late November, which was a big shock to me because I've already planned what to do with the money, like buy a new gaming laptop, so I don't have to bring my old one every day to work. This bonus policy smelled, but I asked my colleagues, and they confirmed that only overtime is paid month to month, and all bonuses are paid annually in November. As I was halfway in the 3rd project, I decided to work even harder to get really good money at the end of the year. After a month, I presented a 3rd design, $650K cost of investment, $350K yearly savings, and WCS of 24 months. It got rejected without a word. Also, my contract was close to end, and the company didn't want to give me a raise. Just the same contract, word to word, for till the end of 2019. I signed it because at the moment I couldn't find anything else that would fit my study schedule. Also, no raise for me, sucked twice as much I expected it, because I've finished my Bachelor of Science degree, Automation and Robotics. Fast forward another few months to the middle of the year. We have a meeting with the CEO, all the white and gold collars from production departments, including my boss's boss. The CEO says that the company is struggling, about half an hour of the speech, and that we are not getting any raises in at least a year of time. Also, if nothing changes in the income, the company will close in 2 to 3 years. So yeah, I wanted to discuss my contract with my boss's boss, but I gave up after the CEO's speech ended. I had the answer already. As most of the crew was underpaid already, the morale rocketed down. Few days later, my boss's boss wanted to see me. At the meeting, he asked what I was working on. I told him about my actual 4th project. $2 cost, $600K in yearly savings, WCS of 29 months. He told me that I should go even bigger, and that we need to reduce costs everywhere if it's possible, and that I am no longer allowed to help fixing stuff, and I should focus all my time on making money savers for the company. For 5 months I worked in front of my computer, sometimes even at home, making Money Saver production line, which was Project 1 and 3 and 4 and some other new stuff, which would cost somewhere around 3.13 8 dollar with 1.72 dollar yearly savings in WCS of 28 months. I don't know exact numbers, as you will find out. I have not finished it, and reported every 2 weeks to my boss and my boss's boss. To the point. November 27th came, and I didn't get my bonus, only the November payout. I asked my colleagues, and they all got theirs around the 20th of November. I asked my boss about it, and he told me he had sent a bonus payroll to his boss, and maybe it got lost somewhere. A few days later, my boss's boss called me and asked to meet him. At the meeting, he explained to me that I won't be getting any bonus because in July, after the CEO's speech, the company's internal rules of bonuses were changed, and now he has no way to pay bonuses to part-time workers. I asked about my contract, which clearly states that I'm getting 1% of implementation costs, among other smaller bonuses, and he told me that it is overruled by internal rules. I proposed raising my pay, so I will get my money till the end of my contract, but he refused because the CEO said no raises. I politely asked him to find another way to pay me. On my side of things, I realized there is pretty much no way for me to get paid, but I still worked as before, maybe with a little bit lower efficiency. I took all my vacation days, finished my projects, and asked my boss for a reference letter, which he gave me. At that point, I just wanted to create as much havoc as I could. Last 2 weeks of December are always vacations for physical production workers, so fixing and maintenance staff can fix everything that has something to fix. For this December, there was scheduled replacement of old and breaking down PLCs, exactly 11, and properly fixing the rest, which was makeshift, repaired, reprogrammed, etc. 17. New G1s were to replace old, rusty and crusty Siemenses, which I had to reprogram. We replaced everything that needed replacement: PLCs, sensors, communication lines, inverters, etc. I had new ladder programs for new PLCs already on my laptop, and modified programs for old ones so they can work with new equipment. On the last day of my work, the 31st of December, I called my boss to ask what I should do with my laptop because of cybersecurity. He just told me to go to the IT department. It guys told me that I have to wipe my hard drive. It's the same thing they told me almost 2 years ago. They wiped it in front of me, gave me a paper signed by them, stating that I have no company files on my personal laptop or any other device. I filled in any form needed for my discharge from the company and came by to say goodbye to my colleague. They all knew why I didn't want to work there anymore. About half of them would be leaving the company soon anyway because underpayment, etc. Aftermath: few dozens of angry calls from my former boss's boss asking me to give them their property. All 5 projects with files for construction, programs, schematics, new programs for PLCs that were replaced, and modified programs for old fixed ones, which the company itself deleted. Also 3 nice calls from my former boss asking me to sign a new contract with better pay, still at least 10% below average for the industry, and more benefits. Of course, I did not take the offer. I have enough money saved till my master's in June, and then a few months, so I can focus on my studies and don't think about it. Right now, the whole production department does not work. As I heard from a former colleague, cleaning up the havoc will take around 6-8 weeks. A few guys gave their leaving notice 3 months in my country. I have no remorse. Story 3. This is from 10 years ago, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. I briefly worked in a family-owned deli in my college days. This deli has been open since the 1920s, and they are known in the area for the food they prepare. No nonsense, the sandwiches and sides are phenomenal. I really miss it and always stop when I visit the area. In the summers, it was standing room only, and the line to order was out the door and around the corner. Anyways, on this particular day, It was just after the dinner rush when I got a phone order for 5 or 6 sandwiches. Not a big deal, except they wanted all the ingredients packaged separately so they could assemble the sandwich themselves. They wanted to buy just the pieces and not pay for the assembly as if we were a grocery store. I stated that we don't do that and the price is the price. He was not happy, but just said to prepare it the way he wanted. I knew a storm was coming. Even if it was prepared perfectly, he'd still find something to complain about. One of those customers. So I told the other staff to not set a finger on the order, and that I'd handle it completely. So I prepared his sandwiches just as he asked, with everything packaged separately. When they came in, I charged them the full sandwich price. Of course they complained that it should be cheaper since I didn't even make a sandwich. I explained to them that it actually took more effort and more materials to package everything separately, rather than make a sandwich so the full price stays. They complained more. I further explained that when extra containers/wrappers are requested, we charge 25 cents for each extra and that I didn't even charge them for that. At that point, they were literally screaming and yelling in the store. Then the guy said the magic words, "I want the manager." "You want the manager? I will gladly get the manager." You see, the manager lived in the apartment directly above the deli. She left at 5 p.m. every day to go home, upstairs, and left us staff to run the place. If there was ever a problem, we would just call upstairs and she would come down. The other important thing to note is that she was a raging alcoholic. She was functional during the day, but come 5 p.m. she had a bottle in her hand and didn't stop until she blacked out. Every so often, she'd come down to grab a 6-pack from the cooler to supplement her hard liquor, and then she'd go back upstairs. By 6 or 7 p.m., she was completely sloshed. No one liked calling her after 5 p.m. because she was raging and honestly a jerk. So I called the manager just like the guy wanted. She was pissed when she answered, but I told her we had a problem customer, and she was suddenly all too happy to come down. She came through the back door so I could explain things, and she just nodded her head and went to the register. It was like she immediately sobered up and was no longer drunk. She listened to them complain, and then she apologized and offered to re-ring the order herself. The guy was grinning like he had won. Narrator, he did not win. She proceeded to weigh each and every item individually. Not only did she weigh the meat and cheese, but she also weighed the tomato and onion slices, the lettuce, the bacon, and the peppers. Then she charged for the random condiments: mayo, mustard, olive oil, vinegar, salt, pepper, oregano. Then she charged for the roll. The total ended up being a few dollars or so cheaper than the actual sandwiches themselves. The guy was happy and was getting his wallet out, but then she started charging for the containers. Since everything was either wrapped or in a container, it ended up being about $8 more than if we had just charged him for a regular sandwich, all said and done. He was flipping out at this point, but she pointed to the sign that was stuck to the front of the register that stated additional containers were extra cost. It was a common request. Guy started yelling, but she yelled even louder. She yelled that we aren't a grocery store, and if he wanted to make his own sandwich, that's where he should go. She then tacked on another $5 or so, $1 for each sandwich, for him being a jerk. He ended up paying for the sandwiches and left. Then she went back upstairs to drink, and we went back to business. He did call 30 minutes later and tried to say we forgot to package his bacon, but I said I personally put it in the bag after the manager weighed it. So it is 110% in the bag, and that I'd get the manager again if he'd like. He didn't want the manager. Story 4. It had started off as a good day until I went shopping at the local Safestay. With everything going on in the world, I was determined to keep my visit brief. I moved through the aisles with purpose, pausing only when necessary, like when I needed to read a label. At one point, an elderly woman politely asked if I could help her grab something from the top shelf. Of course, I obliged. That was my first mistake. As I turned back to my cart, I heard the unmistakable sound of someone clearing their throat, loud and intentional. It was followed by a curt, "Excuse me," in that all too familiar tone. I knew instantly a Karen was upon me. Before I even turned to look, I responded, "I don't work here." As I turned to face her, I saw it a living meme, embodying the classic stereotype down to the last detail. "You helped that old woman," she screeched, her voice sharp and accusatory. "Don't try to tell me you don't work here." "I helped her because she asked politely," I shot back, "which is more than I can say for you. You're being rude, so handle your own shopping. And for the record, I don't work here." I turned away, determined to ignore her shrieking, and continued my shopping. But she wasn't done. She followed me, yelling for a manager at the top of her lungs. A worker approached, clearly uneasy, and tried to understand what was happening. The Karen immediately directed her fury at the worker, demanding, not asking, that she get a manager. The poor worker, understandably wanting to avoid confrontation, hurried off to find one. It didn't take long for a manager to arrive. That's when the Karen really ramped up her performance. She loudly accused me of being rude, refusing to help her, and neglecting my duties as an employee. The manager, calm and professional, informed her that I was simply another customer. That only made things worse. She started yelling even louder, insisting that I did work there because she had seen me helping someone else. At this point, it was obvious she wasn't going to back down. Trying to avoid the escalating chaos, I stepped a few feet away to grab something I needed. That's when I heard her let out an inhuman screech like a wordless battle cry and felt her charging toward me. She lunged, clearly intent on grabbing me, but I sidestepped her. In her rush, she lost her balance and fell flat on her face. I hadn't touched her. She did that to herself. If that were the end of it, I wouldn't be sharing this story. By the time she started stirring, someone had called both the police and an ambulance. The police arrived first, within minutes. They checked on her, but didn't move her right away. When she finally tried to sit up, her face was a mess, bloodied, likely from a broken nose or teeth. She immediately began accusing me of assaulting her, claiming I had pushed her. However, the manager had already explained what happened, and the officers assured me they would review the security footage. The paramedics arrived shortly after, treated her as best they could, and loaded her onto a gurney. As they wheeled her out, she shouted threats about suing everyone involved loudly and rudely. I couldn't help myself. I pointed at the ceiling and said, "Security cameras. Good luck with that." The officers later confirmed that the footage corroborated the manager's account. They took my name, address, and phone number and sent me on my way. As I left, I couldn't help but reflect on how often people assume I work wherever I am. Most are polite and apologize when corrected, but then there are people like this Karen who turn a simple misunderstanding into a dramatic and frankly exhausting experience. Story 5. This story belongs to my beautiful wife, but since it is from many decades ago, from a time before we knew each other, we will here call her Classy Flight Attendant. The setup. Classy Flight Attendant is at this time one of the top-tier flight attendants for her country's national airline. Of course, as with any job, you meet all kinds at work. Today's story concerns one particular pilot who we will call Captain Ricardo. Captain Ricardo likes things the way he likes them. He wants all of the flight attendants in his flight crew to be attractive women. He doesn't think men should be flight attendants. He doesn't think ugly, by his definition, people should be flight attendants. He is not ashamed to mock or ridicule people who he feels have no business in the job. Of course, no matter how Captain Ricardo wants things, the staffing of the entire airline does not revolve around his wishes. He gets the crew he gets, like it or not. The crime. On the occasion in question, one of the flight attendants assigned to his crew is so spectacularly unattractive to him that he picks up the intercom on the plane while the crew is preparing the flight and asks who thought that she would ever be attractive enough to fly for him. He follows that with all sorts of jeers and name-calling, finally going so far as to order security to physically remove her from the plane. She departs in tears and does not fly with him that day. Well, this is just too much. When a number of flight attendants get together later, they discuss Captain Ricardo. He needs to be reminded how much he relies on his flight crew. They are not there just to please his ego. They serve an important function in the operation of the plane and the airline. Classy flight attendant is there, and notes that she will be on a long flight with Captain Ricardo in a couple days. She knows what needs to be done, but tells the other ladies that the less they know, the better. The revenge. On the day of that flight, she arrives early and seeks assignment to the cockpit. On long flights on a jumbo jet, there is one flight attendant who attends only to the cabin crew, the pilot, co-pilot, and engineer, so that they can focus on successfully executing the flight. As per normal, Captain Ricardo will only allow an attractive female flight attendant to serve in that function. Classy flight attendant is classy enough for him and is easily accepted. After they've been in the air a while, the cockpit asks for food, which she happily prepares for them. She has a special ingredient for Captain Ricardo's meal. While she cannot know in advance what the main dish provided today will be, it is known that Captain Ricardo always wants beans and rice with every meal, and this meal is no exception. So she grates chocolate-flavored laxative into Captain Ricardo's beans and mixes it in. She knows he only needs a dose or two to do the trick, but figures the flavor will be off, so he won't eat much and wants to make sure he gets a dose or two. So in the whole box goes. This is where it all goes wrong. Too much revenge? He notices, but does not suspect. He likes the flavor. He even comments while enjoying his meal that it has such a particularly good flavor. Classy flight attendant smiles, and then watches in horror as he downs the plate. She had no contingency plan for this. Things don't take long. About 20 minutes later, he starts to look a little green around the gills, and then run to the restroom, and then again. But it doesn't stop. At a certain point, he stops running back and forth and remains in the restroom, leaving the flying of the plane to the co-pilot. But now, several hours later, the classy flight attendant is getting really worried. She has overplayed her hand. It turns out this co-pilot is not rated to land this plane. There is only one person on board who is and as they are approaching their destination, that person has not left the restroom for an hour or two. If the co-pilot is forced to land, it will easily result in a crash landing or an overshoot of the runway. He will come in too fast and not hit the runway soon enough, plowing through whatever he hits before being able to stop. The plane will be destroyed, people will be injured and possibly killed. People and property on the ground isn't safe either. For all she knows, Captain Ricardo is already dead in the bathroom. She is seriously concerned about all the potential repercussions. The last half hour of the flight is horror compounded with guilt for the classy flight attendant. At the key moment, Captain Ricardo re-emerges and heroically brings the plane in for a successful landing, regardless of the damage done to his dignity and the captain's chair. He may have treated his flight crews poorly, but he is a first-rate pilot. Paramedics remove him in a stretcher from the plane before the passengers are disembarked. He spent several days in the hospital recovering. The aftermath. On his return to work, he is much more humble and no longer verbally abusive. He is a much better captain to work with. It is unclear if any effort was ever made to investigate the matter. It is suspected that those who may have been charged with such an investigation shared a similarly negative opinion of Captain Ricardo's previous behavior and felt like he had it coming. The other flight attendants and some of their supervisors have no doubt about what happened, although it was not generally known by them how close the flight had come to being a complete disaster. Story 6. I stayed in Girl Scouts through my senior year of high school because it meant that I got to go on a trip to Switzerland. My troop of me and 2 other girls planned this from age 14, and I saved up over $4,000. Because we were going to be 18 on the trip, we had discussed getting a drink at some point while in Europe. The leader, the mom of one of the girls, basically said that we'd have to keep it private because it's technically against Girl Scout rules. Not a huge issue, as she was already willing to bend rules restricting us from using Airbnb and whatnot. We'd never been a formal troop, and the leader and co-leader had made jokes about inappropriate subjects numerous times in meetings. We definitely weren't a picture-perfect little troop in that sense. The trip was approaching, and the topic of drinking came up at a meeting. The mom of the other girl was coming on the trip too, and acting as co-leader, so I was the only one there without a parent. I'm gonna call them entitled leader and entitled mom. For context, I am mentally ill but stable on medications. Entitled leader, I haven't really decided about the drinking thing yet. Me, that's all good. But you shouldn't be drinking on your meds anyway. Oh, I've talked to my psychiatrist about it, and he says it's okay. Entitled mom, no. At my old job, I was practically the mom of kids on Prozac, and I know for a fact that people on it can't touch alcohol. She worked as a dispatcher. She answered the phones. Me. Well, I talked to my doctor and did research online, and moderate drinking is considered fine as long as you know your limits. Entitled leader, have you been drinking? At home, with my mother. Yeah, it's legal. At this point, the conversation devolved into them yelling at me until I was in near tears. When my dad arrived to pick me up, I left as quickly as possible. I broke down in the car telling him what happened. The next day, the entitled leader called my dad and said I want to go to Europe just to drink and that it's unsafe. My dad told her she misunderstood. The next meeting, the first thing I did was try to clear up misconceptions. Me. I want to make it clear that I don't want to go to Europe just to drink. I want to go for the experiences and art and monuments. The reason I was upset last time was because I felt that my doctor's reputability was being questioned, and it made me uncomfortable. Entitled leader. Okay, thanks for clearing that up. But no doctor in his right mind would tell a minor to drink on drugs. Entitled mother. Okay, I'm just gonna shut this down because you're being defiant. You need to obey us because we're in charge here. Got it. I was pretty shocked because I was being super respectful. Like I was quoting what my therapist suggested I say to be firm but respectful and explanatory. I was caught off guard and started tearing up a bit, but I used some DBT coping mechanisms and got through it. When my dad came to pick me up, they brought him in and said that we were going to have a meeting with some Girl Scout officials regarding my medications and the drinking thing. They said some misrepresenting things about me that my dad wasn't happy about, but he maintained composure, and we planned the meeting. A couple weeks later, 6 days before we were supposed to fly to Switzerland, the meeting happened. It became clear very quickly that they had lied to us about the premise of the meeting. They intended to remove me from the trip and leave me financially responsible for the loss because I broke Girl Scout rules by mentioning having alcohol. They had met with the officials before this and pitched me as extremely mentally unstable, rebellious, and incapable of dealing with the slightest bit of stress. They also claimed that I was bipolar and schizophrenic, which I'm not. It's also worth noting that I got signed off by 2 doctors and a psychotherapist as stable and fully fit to travel. This backfired because when this meeting happened, I was more composed and respectful than either the entitled leader or the entitled mother. They went off on me for stating how I felt in situations. They got irritated at my mom for saying I was a great student, to explain responsibility and handling stress. And when I mentioned my actual diagnosis, they said that there's no way they would put up with that. Basically, me and my family played an Uno reverse card on them, because they made themselves look terrible. When it became clear that the officials were hearing me and seeing my side, the leaders said that they flat out refused to take me and that there was nothing that could convince them otherwise. That meeting ended with no resolution and the intent of having a phone call the next day. After that meeting, it was pretty clear to the officials that this was discrimination based on a documented disability, so they called my parents and told them that I should be allowed to the trip. They said they were impressed with me and that they'd tell the leaders that they legally have to take me. They did that, but the entitled leader and entitled mom flat out refused. I wasn't surprised if I'm honest. The Girl Scouts required that they make it right, though. I was going to meet my grandma at the end of the Girl Scout trip so I could visit relatives, so I needed a new plane ticket. The entitled leader and entitled mom ended up agreeing to pay for my new plane ticket and forfeit troop funding for a large portion of the trip, since it was so last minute and there was a cancellation fee for my existing ticket. It cost about an extra $2,500. They ended up paying TF up, so I guess karma kinda got them. It was pretty devastating, but I still had a great time in Europe in the end. The reason it was so shocking is because I usually get along with people super well despite my mental illnesses, so it was weird to be hated so much lol. Anyway, don't discriminate against people for their mental illnesses, and thanks for reading.